Good morning, everyone. I am Avishek Kumar. I lead the product management team for PowerStore. So Shannon did an awesome job sort of setting the stage for the next 2 days, talking about the agenda for today and tomorrow. What I will be doing in the next 20 minutes is setting the stage for the PowerStore section of the discussion, right? So I'll go through at a high level what is PowerStore. And as we go along, obviously questions are welcome, but there are specific areas of the session that we'll be doing a deep dive on in the next 3 hours. So where it makes sense, we'll defer the questions to the later session. But again, let's get started. So the goal of the next 20 minutes is to make sure we understand what is PowerStore, where we play, and what are some of the key things that we want to highlight as part of the product. Right, so let's get started. So what is PowerStore? Why do we need it? Right, so one part is related to, as Shannon mentioned earlier, regarding the data itself, how you store it, how you access it, the speeds and feeds, the capabilities and everything, right? But thinking from an end user perspective, a lot of focus is also from an operational perspective, right? So it's not just about the storage, but how the storage integrates into the application framework that customers have, how they're managing the infrastructure, and can we integrate into that. So when we designed PowerStore, we looked at both of those aspects, and you will see that as part of the PowerStore story itself, right? So I'll be talking about the three pillars of the product: data-centric, intelligent, and adaptable. And we'll deep dive into each of these pillars, right? So the first one is data-centric. What do we mean by data-centric? Think of it as, at a high level, the table stakes. We think of that as any storage product that we have. It needs to store the data. It needs to, and PowerStore is able to drive consolidation. We see a lot of times where customers are using different kinds of applications, whether it is physical or virtual, whether it is a traditional application or a modern application that is using containers, as an example, in a Kubernetes environment. So we are able to drive that consolidation, and while we are doing it from a second to none from a performance perspective, as we are driving data efficiency through inline dedupe and compression. So being able to drive the best-in-class performance, best-in-class data efficiency, while providing the flexibility, right? So scale up and scale out, and we'll dive deeper into what we mean by that, right? So being able to sort of independently scale the capacity and performance within a PowerStore cluster. And as I mentioned, we want to do that as in a performance optimized way. So we are using an active-active HA architecture with an end-to-end NVMe. We do use the latest in terms of storage media, whether it is an NVMe flash or a storage class memory, using it in multiple different ways. And then being able to drive performance, which is 7 times faster, 3 times lower latency compared to UnityXT, just as an example. From an efficiency perspective, PowerStore does have inline dedupe and compression. And again, one of the key things that we see in this space is customers want to have simplicity. We don't want them to be thinking about where their data is getting stored and what kind of whether they enable dedupe or compression or not. So all that consideration goes away. All of that is built in. So customers don't have to choose between performance and efficiency as an example, right? So the architecture leverages the benefits that NVMe brings to the table, as an example, leverages SCM capabilities where it makes sense. Dedupe and compression is built in. So again, as Shannon was mentioning earlier, PowerStore is a part of the 4-to-1 of the future-proof guarantee, where we do have a guaranteed 4-to-1 data reduction for our customers, right? So that's the data-centric piece of it. Think of it as table stakes, store the data, do it in the best way possible. But going forward, let's talk about the intelligent piece. So a big piece is the programmable infrastructure, where, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about storing the data. It's about making sure customers are able to integrate it in the best way possible, right? So automate the storage provisioning processes. So if you're in a VMware environment, having a plugin for the vCenter, if you're in a Kubernetes environment, having a CSI plugin, or an Ansible playbook, as an example, to automate the storage workflows, whether it is provisioning or replication or whatever, you name it, right? So the basic goal being to eliminate those manual tasks. The second piece is autonomous appliance, meaning that a lot of things that are built into the product as you scale out the PowerStore cluster with multiple appliances, being able to automate a lot of the considerations where the volume is getting created, where the storage is getting provisioned from. If a particular appliance is getting full, the PowerStore cluster itself will provide recommendations in terms of what we think the storage layout should be. Again, at the end of the day, the decision is for the customer to take our recommendation or do what they think is best. But we do provide those recommendations, and we'll dive deeper into what I mean by that. And the last piece here is from proactive health analytics perspective. So Cloud IQ, as Shannon mentioned earlier, is a big piece of it, but there is intelligence built into the product, whether it is starting from as basic a thing as alerting and making sure there is proactive health alerting, to something as along the lines of capacity prediction, right? So we monitor the capacity consumption on the cluster over a period of time. And yes, we will provide, just as an example, we'll provide an alert of, Mr. Customer, your appliance is getting full and you're at 90% capacity utilization. Or the other way of intelligence is to be able to say that based on how you have been using the cluster over the last X amount of days, we think that you will run out of capacity in 6 months or 9 months or 1 year, right? And that helps provide another input to the customer to determine what they want to do with it, right? So initiate more capacity expansion or whatever it is, right? So that's built into the product as well.
Hi, Avishek. This is Pietro. Yeah. I have a question for you. Is this Cloud IQ solution collecting information only from the PowerMax and PowerStore arrays, or can it also collect metrics from other portion of the infrastructure and connect the dots and provide really in-depth insight?
Absolutely. Good question. So we are looking at Cloud IQ as a single pane of glass for the entire portfolio that we have. So in fact, Cloud IQ started with coverage for Unity arrays, right? And we have been expanding that to cover other parts of the portfolio. We in fact have a dedicated session for Cloud IQ later where we want to show what we do in Cloud IQ. It's not just slides here. So the goal is to be having that comprehensive coverage across the entire portfolio. So you'll see. So again, short answer, yes, we do. We started with Unity, PowerStore, PowerMax is there. There are other parts of the portfolio that are coming in as well. So as an example, Power Vault is already there, and we are looking at other pieces as well.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this fascinating statistic of 99% less staff time? Where does that come from? How is it measured?
Sure. So if you don't mind, actually, the next slide talks about what we do, and we'll come back to that 99%.
Okay, great.
If that's okay. Okay, so let's move on to that's a good segue. So let's start with what is PowerStore, right? So we have a construct of an appliance, right? So that's the most basic building block of the cluster, right? You don't, as a customer, I don't have to start with a single appliance, but that's the most basic starting point, if you will. So let's say you start with a single appliance. It has 2 nodes for HA perspective. So if one node goes away, from a high availability perspective, you have everything covered. And you can scale up, right? So you can add as you can start as small as 6 drives. You can add more capacity as you go along. And because PowerStore is a scale-out architecture, we allow adding additional appliances as part of the cluster as well, right? So you add another. As a customer, I realize that I want to add more, get more performance. So I add another appliance. It gets automatically discovered. And what will happen after that is, from a PowerStore internal architecture perspective, we'll be monitoring how the capacity is being used. So day one, when the volume gets created, I don't have to ask where the volume gets created or whatever it is. We make that decision based on how the capacity is laid out today, right? Now, going forward, if in this example, first off, you'll notice that the second appliance doesn't have the same capacity as the first one. So it doesn't have to be. It's a heterogeneous deployment. And depending on what the customer requirements are, the second appliance can be a different model type than the first one. So there is no forcing the customer that you have to have a homogeneous infrastructure. Now, if the second appliance is getting full, we will provide a recommendation, and the recommendation is based on a bunch of factors, right? So we can see that there are 100 volumes or 200 volumes that get created on appliance 2, and 5 out of those 100 volumes are, if you move from appliance 2 to appliance 1, we will take care of the movement part of it. It is non-disruptive from an end user perspective. But we provide a recommendation saying that, you know what, based on what we know, what we understand, we think that you should move 5 out of these 100 volumes from appliance 2 to appliance 1. It's a recommendation, right? So that's where that 99% metric comes in, where the customer doesn't necessarily have to worry about which volume I select, which volume I move from where to where. It's a recommendation that we provide. Eventually, as I said earlier, it's a customer's choice, right? So if the customer comes back and says that I know my infrastructure best, I know what to move where, absolutely we enable that as well. But it's that automation of recommendation which the customer can choose. It's a single click, and we take care of it after that.
Yeah, Avishek.
Yes.
It looks like it's a cluster operation, cluster solution. But what's the intercluster fiber, or how are you talking intercluster? Is that just Ethernet, 100 gig Ethernet or something like that? And so what would you say that the difference between a tight cluster and a loose cluster? I kind of classify this as a loose cluster because I can just keep adding up to, I don't know, 8 number nodes or something like that, or?
Yes. 4 appliances, 8 nodes. Yes.
I got you. And the data migration, although your recommendations are, let's migrate 5 volumes from A to B or B to A rather. So that once you say yes, go ahead, then it's automatic after that?
Yes, absolutely. So it is non-disruptive from a host perspective, right? But
okay.
I'll go back to your first part of the comment first. So it's a very conscious architectural choice where, if you notice, the interconnectivity between the appliances is not a part of the data path. So from a host perspective, you're not going over the top of the rack switch or whatever the interconnectivity between the appliance to be able to access the data. So at any point of time, the volume is sitting on a particular appliance. It's again, we do have products which do provide that tight cluster, as you mentioned earlier. Here, the value is at any point of time, we want to drive that consistency in performance where in this economics, where in this segment of the market where customers are looking at that economics and performance, we believe that this is the right balance between the two. And again, if the requirement is to have, for whatever reason, if the requirement is to have a volume which exceeds the performance of what a single appliance can do, which, by the way, is in multiple hundreds of thousands of IOPS, then yes, there are products that can do that. But PowerStore, it's, in your words, as you said, it's loosely coupled in that sense, where at any point of time, the volume is sitting on a specific appliance. So if you're using an SCM on that appliance, I'm not waiting for the IO path to go over the interconnect to get data from there. I am able to get that microseconds of latency because I'm accessing it directly.
All right.
And to answer your question, the interconnect between the appliances is through the top of the rack Ethernet connectivity. So 10 gig, 25 gig. But it's not in the data path. So that's why I don't need an InfiniBand or 100 gig connectivity.
Okay.
So basically, it is more like a federation solution rather than a storage scale-out solution.
It is scale out. It is, I would still say it is scale out because you are able to add more capabilities within the same infrastructure. Yes, it is not shared cache. I would say that appliance 1 is not sharing the cache with appliance 2. As I mentioned, that there are other products that do that within our own portfolio. So depending on what the use case is, this would be a better fit compared to something else.
Okay, but do you have any plan to add something like, for example, data protection with a volume that is mirrored inside another appliance of the cluster to have resilience? Or, as you said before, actually a volume cannot span more than one appliance, but maybe you have some future plan on this, or do you think that this kind of cluster from capacity point of view is enough?
So before I answer that question directly, I'll highlight that the single appliance is a fully HA solution, right? So it is a dual node architecture. It is all the dynamic resiliency engine protects against single drive, dual drive failures, all that power failures, redundant power supplies, all that stuff, right? So a single appliance by itself is fully redundant, fully available from that perspective. So even today we do have, if the customers are looking for protection So a single appliance going away is like multiple failures happening from that. So it's not as if one thing goes away and the appliance is offline. Now, we do have async replication between two clusters where we can do that. Right now, again, having multiple appliances is not a protection mechanism, if you will. It's about adding more capabilities to your infrastructure. If you're looking for protection against this entire cluster going away, the data center going up in fire or whatever, there are solutions for that as well, absolutely. And we'll talk about some of the data mobility and data protection options that we have with PowerStore in one of the later sessions.
I have a question, just real quick. This slide that you're showing us, because I just want to make sure I've got the right footprint. When you're talking about this appliance, and these nodes are just drives, right? So this is all in one
nodes
server?
Are two compute nodes. Think of it as those are two nodes which are processing the storage IOs, and there is some amount of storage capacity. So let me go back. So in this is one appliance. There are two nodes which are processing the storage requests coming in from the host perspective, and then there is storage sitting behind it.
Okay. And the storage is onboard, or the storage is external?
There are drives that are within the first box itself. We call it the base enclosure. And for scale up, you can add more expansion enclosures to add more capacity, which is the 3 more shelves you see there.
Got it. And so as you built it out, then those are additional appliances.
Correct. This is appliance 2, this is appliance 3, and then 4.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Kirsten from Germany. I have a question. Could you go back a slide? Yeah, thank you. I didn't get that. Maybe you mentioned it before, but is it possible when you talk about machine learning autonomous appliances, is it possible that applications can allocate storage capacities?
So everything is thin provision. So when you provision, just take an example, 1 terabyte volume, then we consume storage as we go along. So if you're asking, can I reserve capacity in advance? Then no. So everything is thin provision to begin with.
And it's also not dynamically during the process that an application, when it needs more storage capacity, then it autonomously can allocate it.
Absolutely. There's nothing that the application needs to do. Application sees a 1 terabyte volume, but on the backend side, we will consume whatever we need. Okay. Okay, a couple of things. I know we have only 2 minutes to go in this session, but a couple of things I wanted to cover here. So the third piece is adaptable, actually the most interesting, important, critical one. So this is all about flexibility, right? So what kind of deployments you go with, what kind of choices our customers have, right? So let me dive directly into the core pieces of it. So PowerStore, as I said, it's a brand new architecture. We started from the ground up. We leveraged pieces of the architecture where it made sense from other products, and I'll give some specific examples. But it's a container-based architecture, right? And what that means is there's a lot of adaptability in terms of how we deploy PowerStore OS, which is the software running on PowerStore. So one is a standard deployment where you take the PowerStore OS, you have a capacity, as I mentioned earlier, in PowerStore, and you have traditional or modern applications running externally across a network. So this is no different from any other product, a lot of other products where you're using storage externally. What we also enable in PowerStore is what we call a hypervisor-based deployment or PowerStore X models, where we take the same PowerStore OS, we containerize, it's already containerized. Now we are running it, we put a VMware ESXi hypervisor layer on top of it. And what that allows me to do is take a certain amount of CPU, memory, hardware resources from the same appliance, run it inside a virtual machine. And by the way, you can still do, because it is the same PowerStore OS, you can still expose storage to the external world using the network and traditional modern workloads running on external hosts. But what that also allows us to do is run the applications natively on PowerStore as well. So we refer to that as an apps-on capability for the product, where again, the idea there is you continue to do whatever we expect to be able to do for exposing storage to the external world. But now we have the ability to consolidate it to a certain extent natively on the platform. And we see a lot of interest from customers typically in remote office kind of locations where they have some applications where they want to consolidate it on a 2-node, single 2U NVMe flash storage, and being able to run applications on the same platform as well. So that's, again, that's a choice. Once again, Ray. So that's a choice for the customers, right? So they choose which deployment model they want to go with. So we are not forcing one way or the other. And sorry, go ahead, Ray.
So I don't know if you want to tell us, but what's the percentage of sales of PowerStore X versus PowerStore T? I mean, are you seeing a lot of adoption of this solution, I guess, is the question I'm asking.
So if you look at the entire PowerStore sales, we did expect that a majority, meaning more than 50%, would be the standard deployment where we are looking at existing customers and they are looking to modernize and move to PowerStore. So which is true, right? And as I said, it is a minority in terms of the overall PowerStore sales. I cannot share the exact numbers here, but I would say that it is a differentiating aspect of the architecture. It's a choice, as I said, for the customers, and customers are appreciating that. And we do see, as I said, customers who are looking at this as a way to consolidate their applications, directly integrate into their existing VMware infrastructure, and be able to move applications onto the platform if they wanted to.
And it's a non-disruptive upgrade from T to X? Is that?
No, it's a choice that we do because the VMware hypervisor has to be installed on the PowerStore. It's a choice that the customer does. And again, as far as the VMware license is concerned, there is a choice in terms of whether the customer brings their own or they buy from Dell, however it goes.
All right, thank you.
And actually, the session after me, Marco Abella, he's one of my colleagues, and he'll dive deeper into AppsOn and what we are seeing there. One more very quick item that I want to highlight here is the anytime upgrade. So I talked about the adaptable architecture of the product. So that's, again, the scale up and scale out, continuous innovation using the container-based architecture. But we additionally put a nice business program around the upgrades, which is referring to anytime upgrades. And I want to spend some time on that. Right. So from an adaptable architecture, what we are enabling customers to do is subscribe to innovation, as they call it. Right. So day one, consolidate your applications, different workloads running on the same platform. Day two, as your requirements change from a capacity performance perspective, you can scale up, scale out. However, again, the appliances can be of different types and all that stuff. And the last piece is whether it is software or hardware, we enable continuous upgrades as part of the flexible architecture, right? So one is from a node perspective, as we come out with newer generation of hardware, we will enable data in place upgrades and non-disruptive upgrades to our customers. And of course, goes without saying, as we come out with new software, and I'll talk about PowerStore OS 2.0 release in a few minutes, it's a non-disruptive upgrade as well. So that allows customers to use the new innovation that we bring to the table. And last one that I wanted, sorry, yes.
Just real quick, because I was just wondering, how much inspiration did y'all take from previous products? Because it looks an awful lot like Compellent.
As I said, the design of the product itself is brand new, right? So the data path and how the data services come together is brand new. We leveraged pieces of it where it made sense, right? And SC, as you mentioned earlier, yes, it has a similar framework in terms of how the appliances are built, but there are significant differences there as well. But it's similar in that regard. You can argue that the file services on PowerStore, we have a fully baked file stack on our existing Unity product today. That's one example of a container-based architecture where we containerize the file stack, and that is running as a container on PowerStore. So it's the same SD-NAS stack, UFS 64 file stack that exists on Unity that is running on PowerStore today. So we leverage pieces of it where it made sense, but it's not. I would not say it's exactly the same. But you use the right word, inspiration, absolutely yes. Okay, anytime upgrade. So essentially, it's a as I said, it's a subscription to innovation, right? So we allow customers to either enroll in the program and be able to upgrade to the next gen platform that we come out. So it's a data in place upgrades where you replace the nodes in the existing appliance, or where you go from. So customers are subscribed to be able to go to the next gen or next gen plus higher models when we come out with that. Or leveraging the scale-out architecture, get a discount on the second appliance based on what the first appliance was. So anytime upgrade essentially allows customers to be confident in terms of if and when we come out with a newer hardware generation, they are covered. They can the upgrade to the next hardware generation is covered. We are not forcing them to wait for 3 years and then only subscribe to another maintenance cycle and then you can upgrade. It can be done anytime in the contract and absolutely no renewal required. So there's a lot of flexibility. We are leveraging the architectural benefits of PowerStore to provide that upgrade capability and flexibility to our customers. So I realize I'm 5 minutes over on my first session, so I'll stop here. And we can go into the PowerStore OS 2.0 discussion. But any questions? I don't want to skip over any questions that you might have. I'll leave this page here for more resources. Again, there are landing pages for PowerStore, Dell.com, PowerStore Docs has all the documentation. There's a developer portal that talks about the APIs that I mentioned earlier and the integrations that we are building.